What does it take to transform a person who has spent their entire life standing still? For Kai, the answer came wrapped in desperation and a single impossible choice. In the shadow of the Amber Mountains, where morning mist clung to terraced rice fields like silk scarves, there lived a boy who had perfected the art of doing nothing. Kai wasn't simply lazy. He was a genius of avoidance, an architect of ease. While other children in the valley hauled water buckets until their shoulders burned, Kai engineered a system of bamboo channels that gravity did the work for him. While they spent hours chasing crows from the grain stores, he hung strips of mirror-polished tin that caught the sunlight and sent the birds scattering in confusion. His mother had died when he was young, leaving only Kai and his father to tend their small farm. His father, a quiet man with hands like weathered stone, would watch his son's clever shortcuts with eyes that held both admiration and an unnamed sorrow. The work always got done, yes, but there was a softness in Kai that worried him, a reluctance to push through difficulty that he feared would one day crack under real pressure. The summer Kai turned 17, the sky forgot how to weep. Week after week, the sun blazed mercilessly over the valley. The rice fields, usually emerald and alive, began to shrivel into brittle brown fingers reaching toward an indifferent heaven. Every morning, Kai's father rose before dawn to carry water from the distant creek, his silhouette bent beneath the weight of wooden pails. Every evening, he returned more stooped than before. Then came the morning his father didn't rise at all. Kai found him still in bed, his skin burning with fever, his breath shallow and rattling like wind through dead leaves. The village healer came and shook her head gravely. "A water sickness," she said. "His body is exhausted. He needs medicine from the city, expensive medicine, and he needs rest. The farm work falls to you now." For the first time in his life, Kai couldn't engineer his way out of reality. He tried. Every day he dragged himself to the dying fields under the brutal sun, hauling water until his back screamed and his hands bled. His clever contraptions meant nothing when there was no rain to channel, no shortcuts to take. By noon, he would collapse beneath the old persimmon tree, muscles trembling, watching his father's life's work crumble to dust around him. And worse than the physical pain was the realization burning in his chest. I did this to myself. All those years of avoiding difficulty, of choosing comfort over strength, they had left him hollow. Now, when it mattered most, he had nothing to give. One evening, as purple shadows pooled in the valley and the first stars pierced the sky, Kai sat with his head in his hands and wept. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the empty field, to his father, to himself. "I'm sorry I never learned how to be strong." The next morning, everything changed. A royal courier on horseback thundered through the valley, announcing a grand competition in the capital. The emperor himself would host trials of skill and wit, and the victor would receive a fortune in silver coins, enough to buy medicine for 100 sick fathers, enough to save a dozen failing farms. Kai's heart, which had felt dead for weeks, suddenly kicked like a startled horse. He walked to his father's bedside. The old man's eyes were barely open, but they found Kai's face. "I'm going to the capital," Kai said quietly. "I'm going to win that silver, and I'm going to save our farm." His father's cracked lips attempted a smile. "You've never competed in anything." "I know." Kai squeezed his father's hand. "But I'm going to start now."
The journey to the capital took 4 days on foot through mountain passes and humid lowland forests. Kai's legs, unused to such exertion, screamed with every step. Blisters bloomed on his heels, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Every time exhaustion pulled at him, he pictured his father's fevered face and pushed forward. When he finally emerged onto the plains and saw the capital's jade-tiled roofs glittering in the distance, relief and terror warred in his chest.
The competition grounds sprawled beside the emperor's palace, a vast courtyard already swarming with hundreds of competitors. They were warriors with arms like tree trunks, scholars with calculating eyes, athletes whose bodies moved like coiled springs. Kai, thin and exhausted and covered in road dust, felt like a sparrow among eagles. "What am I doing here?" But before doubt could sink its teeth too deep, trumpets screamed in the emperor's voice. A tall woman in crimson silk stepped onto the platform. "2 challenges!" Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Only those who complete both shall claim the prize. The first, you must cross the Mirror Lake." She gestured to the vast body of water behind her, its surface reflecting the sky like polished glass. "The first 10 to reach the opposite shore advance." Kai's stomach plummeted. The lake stretched impossibly wide, at least a mile from shore to shore. He wasn't a strong swimmer. He'd barely make it halfway before his arms gave out. The gong struck. Chaos erupted. 300 bodies surged toward the water's edge, a stampede of desperation and ambition. The strongest dove in immediately, their powerful strokes cutting through the water like knives. Within seconds, the front runners were already 50 meters out, and Kai hadn't even reached the shore. He stopped at the water's edge, chest heaving, watching the lake churn with thrashing limbs. "Think. Don't just do, think."
His eyes scanned the shoreline. There, a small grove of hollow reeds growing in the shallows, and there, old fishing nets abandoned near a dock. And floating near the pylons, several large gourds used for fishing floats. The goal wasn't to swim, the goal was to reach the other side. While the masses exhausted themselves in the water, Kai worked feverishly on the shore. He bundled the reeds together, tied them with fishing net, and lashed the gourds to the sides for stability. His hands moved with the same ingenuity he'd once used to avoid work, but now every action was charged with desperate purpose. 5 minutes later, he pushed his makeshift raft into the lake and climbed aboard. It was crude, it was wobbly, but it floated. Using a broken oar he'd found, Kai paddled with everything he had. His shoulders burned, splinters dug into his palms, but the raft moved steadily forward, and soon, impossibly, he was passing swimmers who'd already burned through their strength. Spectators along the shore began to notice. Fingers pointed, voices murmured in surprise. "Look, that boy! He's not swimming at all." By the time Kai's raft scraped onto the far shore, 9 others had already finished. He rolled off into the shallows, gasping, trembling, soaked to the bone. But he'd made it. Barely. The 10th qualifier. The crowd erupted in applause, shocked that the thin, desperate-looking boy had outthought the competition. But Kai didn't hear them. He lay in the sand, chest heaving, tears mixing with lake water on his face. "I did it. I actually did it." The second challenge began at dawn. 10 competitors stood before 10 massive stone blocks, each one as tall as a person and carved from solid granite. The emperor's voice raised her hand. "You must move your block to the finish line, 1/4 mile down this road. You may use only the tools provided, rope, a wooden pole, or a chisel and mallet.
The first to finish claims the silver. Kai stared at the stone block, his heart sinking. It had to weigh as much as a bull. The warrior beside him grabbed the rope immediately and began heaving with monstrous strength. Another competitor wedged the pole beneath his block and started inching it forward with leverage. Kai picked up the chisel and mallet. The crowd murmured, confused. What was he doing? The others were already making progress, muscles straining, their blocks creeping forward centimeter by painful centimeter. Kai just knelt beside his stone block and began to chip away at it. Tap, tap, tap. He worked methodically, carving away the sharp corners, smoothing the edges. The warrior was already 10 meters ahead, his face purple with effort. The crowd began to jeer. "He's wasting time. The boy's given up."
But Kai didn't stop. He thought of his father. He thought of the farm turning to dust. He thought of every easy shortcut he'd ever taken, and he channeled all that cleverness into this one crucial moment. Tap, tap, tap. Slowly, impossibly, the square block became rounder, smoother. 20 minutes passed. The leaders were nearly halfway to the finish line. Kai stood up, covered in stone dust, hands bleeding from the work. His block was no longer a block. It was something approaching a cylinder. Rough and imperfect, but undeniably round. He braced his shoulder against it and pushed. The stone rolled. The crowd's jeering turned to gasps. Kai pushed harder, breaking into a run as momentum built. The cylinder rolled faster and faster, rumbling down the road like controlled thunder. Spectators scrambled back as Kai and his rolling stone flew past the warrior, past the scholar, past every exhausted competitor, still dragging their impossible burdens. In the final stretch, Kai's legs burned with a pain he'd never known. His vision blurred, but he could see the finish line, could see his father's face, could see the future he'd almost lost. With a final desperate shove, he sent the stone cylinder across the line. First place. The world went silent. Then it exploded.
The silver felt impossibly heavy in Kai's hands as he knelt before the emperor. But it wasn't the weight of metal, it was the weight of everything it represented. Second chances, redemption, love strong enough to transform a coward into a competitor. The journey home took 4 days. The return to his father took seconds. The old man was awake when Kai burst through the door, and the tears that fell when he saw the silver were the first rain the valley had seen in months. The medicine worked, the farm survived, and Kai, thin, clever Kai, who had once engineered a life of ease, learned that the hardest work is sometimes the only work worth doing. Not because it's easy, but because it matters